It's like a warm hug inside of my body.
Welcome to the channel. If you clicked on this link, chances are you're looking at incorporating more vegan or plant-based meals into your diet.
This is happiness in a sandwich.
If so, this video is perfect for you. This is a giant, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm looking for a very specific word. Compilation. It's a compilation. This video is a compilation of a bunch of my recipes all together.
This is the reason my wife still loves me after all those years.
All of these are pretty much beginner recipes, and what's great is I've grouped these together in different things like breakfast, lunch, snacks, dinners, desserts. So you can watch this video a couple different ways. You could just go through the groupings of the different categories, or you could watch recipe by recipe.
I'm just gonna go on. You guys have anything else to do?
I'm gonna give you lots of options below. You can just go through the chapters section and then check out all the different chapters for the options for however you want to view this video. I'm also gonna include the links below for my website and the recipes if you want to read them that way after you watch this video. Now before we dive in, please take a moment and hit that subscribe button so you can get more content like this. While you're watching this, if you see any recipes that you want to make, let me know in the comments. Also, let me know where you are watching this from. I myself live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Otherwise, grab a drink, sit back and relax and enjoy a whole boatload of vegan plant-based recipes.
Muffins. All of today's recipes are available on pbwithj.ca. I grew up loving scrambled eggs as a kid, so this is my nice whole food plant-based substitute. It's a tofu scramble, and you can make it totally customized for what you like. You can just do the scramble on its own, but I always like to throw a couple vegetables into it. Before we started, I pre-cooked some red peppers, mushrooms, and red onions. The first thing we're gonna do is we are going to put in some vegetable broth, about a half a cup. And then right away, this is tofu right out of the package. All I did was just kind of cut it up. We're gonna crumble that right into the pan. We'll break it up more with our spatula. I'm using a whole block of tofu. This is easily enough to serve kind of 2 adults, or you can make a big batch of it and have it for another breakfast morning. Listen to that squishy. It's not an attractive sound, but that's the sound it makes. You'll see I didn't break it all up with my hands, so we just keep on kind of mashing it down and letting it cook down as the vegetable broth evaporates. We'll let this cook down for about 7 to 10 minutes, roughly. And we will add a little bit of seasoning as we go. So that's looking pretty good. The kind of tofu I'm using here is extra firm. Firm would also work. It just helps hold the shape. If you use a softer tofu, it'll just kind of fall apart and turn into a bit of a mush, which I don't think is what you're gonna want. So I'm just gonna add just a little bit more vegetable stock just to help loosen things up. And now this is where we're gonna add the flavors in. Teaspoon of garlic salt, and then 1/4 cup of nutritional yeast. This is gonna add a lot of the flavor, give it even a bit of a cheesy vibe. It looks like scrambled eggs to me. This is where I'll mix in those vegetables, mix it more of a scramble here. Let those get mixed in, and then just as that's going, I like to add a little bit of leafy green in there. So I just kind of chopped up a bit of kale, and once that's wilted down, we are ready to go. This is a really, really quick morning breakfast that you can make for a bunch of people, or you can just store the rest for leftovers. It keeps in the fridge really, really well. And I don't know, if I'm crazy, I think that looks like scrambled eggs to me. That's really nice. You could top this with some hot sauce, salsa, ketchup, whatever you like to put on scrambled eggs. Make it your own. Nothing says lunch like a good sandwich. So I'm gonna show you how to make a chickpea salad sandwich. But first, as an additional topping, I like to make a smoky toasted almond. So we start with 3/4 cup of almond. We make a liquid mixture here using maple syrup, liquid smoke, tamari, or soy sauce. Let's give that a little slushy slush. It'll mix together nicely. And then we're gonna mix that with some nutritional yeast to give it a bit of a cheesy flavor, as well as some paprika, garlic salt, and then just a little bit of salt and pepper. Let's give it a nice good stir. Oh, that smell, it smells so good already. Mix a bit of a paste. We're gonna add it to the almonds. And then just mix it around until everything is nice and coated. It's gonna be sticky and gloopy together, but we'll fix that in a second. Make sure it gets all over. You want it to be just coated on top of those almonds. Oh, I can't wait. This is the kind of thing that just elevates this sandwich to the next level. So we're gonna spread these out onto a baking sheet. Just flatten them all out so it's a nice single layer. So that way they all get roasted nicely. We're gonna bake that at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 10 minutes, and then we're gonna toss them around and bake them for another 5 minutes. So now we're gonna make the mixture for the chickpea salad. This is 3 cups of chickpeas cooked. Don't worry about overcooking them because we're gonna mash them up anyway. Some lemon juice, a ripe avocado. And we are just gonna mash the heck out of it. Use a big bowl because you want room to work with this guy. So that's about the right texture we want. If there's still a couple chunks of chickpeas, that's okay. It'll add a little bit of extra texture to the dish. So now we're gonna add the rest of our mix-ins. We got about 3/4 cup of red onions, about 2 stalks of diced celery, and the secret weapon, fresh dill. If you don't have fresh dill, dried dill will work just as well. This is about 3/4 cup. If you're using dried dill, use a lot less, maybe a tablespoon. Put some in and then see if it's too much. And then just a little squirt or 2 of hot sauce. Oh, that's a bit more than a squirt. That's all right. You can omit the hot sauce if you don't like things with a little bit of a kick, but I do. And then we are just gonna mix that around till everything is nice and combined. So now the best part, we're gonna assemble the sandwich. So I'm using some delicious sourdough that we made the other day. I'm gonna put a good portion of the chickpea mixture and just mash it into the bread. Then I'm gonna crumble it with some of these smoked almonds that I've cut up. And then just for fun, I'm gonna throw a tomato on top. And then we top it with the sourdough. This will make enough for about at least half a dozen sandwiches. And then, I mean, there's no pretty way to eat something like this, so we're just gonna smash it into our faces. It's so good. The almond gives it that nice little crunch. The celery in there just gives it some extra texture. All the flavors going together. It's so delicious. This is easily one of my favorite sandwiches, and this mixture will last for a couple days in the fridge. That's so good. This is a perfect example of how you can take a comfort food classic and make it whole food plant-based. We're gonna make loaded nachos, or as we call them in my family, Nacho Mountain. The first step is replacing what we would normally put on top would be like a ground beef, any kind of meat mixture. We're gonna make what I call Mexi lentils. So it's literally just putting a cup and 3/4 of water into a pressure cooker, a cup of lentils. I'm doubling the batch, so I got a lot more here. And then you're gonna add about 1 to 2 tablespoons of a taco spice mix. If you're making your own, it's mostly chili powder mixed with paprika, cumin, garlic salt, onion salt, red pepper flakes. Give it a really good mix. And then we are gonna cook that on the pressure cooker for about 10 minutes and then just let it sit. By the time everything else is ready, it'll be good to go. If you're doing this on a stove pot, you'll need a lot longer. You wanna bring it up to a boil and leave it for about 30 minutes. So now we are gonna make the nacho cheese. We're gonna take an onion and a carrot, saute that on the pan. If it starts to stick, you can throw in a little bit of broth. We're just gonna let that cook for about a minute. A little salt on top. It helps to release juices inside the vegetables. I'm gonna add just a little bit of my broth. So now I'm gonna throw in the potatoes and we're gonna let that just cook for about 3 minutes. So this is cooked down to the right amount. And now we're gonna add some vegetable broth, some tamari. You could also use soy sauce here, and some minced garlic. And we are gonna crank this up and get it up to the point where it's at a simmer. And then we're gonna leave it for about 10 to 15 minutes until the carrots and the potatoes are really, really soft. we're just gonna dump all of that good potato carrot goodness into our high-speed blender. This is where the nerdy magic happens. Some tahini, we have lemon juice, paprika, and garlic powder. And last but not least, nutritional yeast. This is the key to making it nice and cheesy. We are gonna blend this until it is nice and smooth, and then we're gonna add that tapioca starch. This is the stuff that's gonna make it really, really get thick and bind like a cheese. All right, so that's looking pretty well combined. So now we're gonna put it onto the stove top and stir it around and let it just kind of thicken a bit. The consistency you want is somewhat like a gravy, maybe a little thicker than gravy. That takes about 10 minutes, and then while we're doing that, we're gonna start to assemble our nachos. So now we have our little Mexi lentils. They're really ready to go. And they're just kind of clumpy and tasty and delicious. We got a nice little kick to them. I love these things. So we're just gonna really generously sprinkle that all over the top of these chips. I've just put on some diced red pepper and some green olives, but you can top these with whatever you want. You want some jalapenos on there? Go for it. Making a mess. It's all right, nachos are supposed to be messy, right? If you're not getting a little messy while you cook, you just don't care. So now we're gonna add that ooey gooey cheese. I just like to take a scoop of it and just slather it all over. So this acts a bit more like a queso in this recipe. What's great about this cheese is I will put this in the fridge and it's gonna thicken up, and then tomorrow I'll be able to use it like a spread. It's perfect for making a grilled cheese sandwich. And then it also freezes really well, and then you can just grate it on top for shredded cheese. It is easily the most versatile cheese sauce that I have figured out, and I use it for everything. We are gonna cook this for about 10 minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. You want it to get a little bubbly and just heat it all the way through. So the cheese has a nice little golden brown on top of it, and that's kind of what you're looking for. It chars it just a little bit in a really nice way. You can add some additional toppings at this time. I'm gonna throw some green onions on here. Feel free to add any additional toppings that you want, some guacamole, some salsa, some sour cream, but I'm just gonna have it as is. It's so delicious. It has that queso flavor and the meatiness from the lentils. It's just so comforting, delicious goodie. All of today's recipes are available on pbwithj.ca. One of my favorite breakfasts is granola, and I like to serve it just on top of a heaping pile of fruit. The problem with most granolas that you buy in the store is they're covered in processed sugar as well as oil, and so I wanted to make a version that didn't have that. So we start with 4 cups of some kind of an oat mixture. You can use quinoa flakes, bran flakes, whatever you want in there. And then I like to coat the oats with some kind of a seasoning. Right here, I've just got about a tablespoon of cinnamon, and I just mix that up nicely so it gets all over the place. On top of that, you want a cup of chopped nuts. Get in there and mix it right up. And then your other mix-ins. I tend to do things in 1/4 cup increments, so that way you can put as many things as you want in. 1/4 cup of sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, coconut, a 1/4 cup of cranberries, and a 1/2 cup of raisins. Just want everything to get nice and combined. Before I started, I soaked a cup of dates in hot water. So we're gonna put that into a food processor. Don't throw out the water just yet, we're gonna use some of it. A 1/2 cup of tahini. We're gonna put about a 1/4 cup to a 1/2 cup of that water that we soaked the dates in. Puree this inside the food processor until everything's pretty much combined. All right, that's looking pretty good. We're gonna pour this inside of here and then mix it all around until everything is really, really nicely coated. You wanna do this in a really big bowl, so that way you got some room for your spatula to move around. So now I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna divide this as best I can between 2 pans. If you put a little bit of water on your palms, it'll make things stick a little bit less. Get this as flat as you can so it it bakes pretty evenly. So we're gonna bake this at 300 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 minutes. We're going to take this out halfway and we're gonna just give it a good stir around so all the stuff that's not cooked as well underneath will get a chance to brown up on top. So as you can see, this turned out really, really well. There's a nice little golden sheen on top of the granola. This is my breakfast most days. It's crunchy, it's smooth, and the fruit gives it a little blast of sweetness. Customize this however you want. Use different grains, different nuts, different seeds, different fruit. It can literally be a different cereal every single morning. I'm just gonna eat the whole thing. You guys have anything else to do? Pancakes are a staple in my house on the weekends and sometimes the weekdays. I'm gonna show you my family's go-to pancake mix that I have to give my wife credit for. We tried a bunch of different recipes until we landed on this one. You can make it gluten-free just by swapping out the flour for a gluten-free 1-to-1, and you can also add whatever mix-ins you want. What I love about this one is it doesn't add any oil, it doesn't add any butter, or it doesn't add any eggs. And I'll show you the different things we use to make up for that. First off, we're gonna start with 2.5 cups of flour. I like to use whole wheat. You can mix this with whole wheat and white flour, or you could put in a gluten-free 1-to-1. To that, we're gonna add 1/4 cup of flaxseed. This is what's gonna act as your egg binder. It's gonna help everything mix together. A teaspoon of cinnamon, a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of baking soda, and 4 teaspoons of baking powder. This is what's gonna make it really fluffy. Whisk together all of those ingredients until they're nice and mixed. And now you can just add the wet ingredients right into here. You don't have to pre-mix them on their own. 2 cups of plant milk. This is an oat milk. You could use almond or any other non-dairy milk of your choice. I have 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, about 2 teaspoons of vanilla. You could add a different flavor extract in there if you wanted to. Almond is nice sometimes. You could also do just something more fancy and fun. This is what's gonna replace the butter and the oil. It's applesauce. This is a 1/2 cup of applesauce. If you don't have any applesauce, you could also mash up 1 large, really ripe banana. We're just gonna stir this until it's well combined. So after that is nice and mixed together, we're gonna let it sit for about 2 to 5 minutes, just so that flaxseed can expand and really start to bind everything together. While that's happening, heat a pan on low to medium heat. Once the pan's at the right temperature and the batter is rested, we're gonna scoop out 1/4 cup increments onto the pan. Cook for about 2 minutes until you start to see little bubbles forming on top of the pancake. Flip and do the same. The pancake is so fluffy. The cinnamon just rises it up just a little bit, just enough. It's delicious. It's just packed with flavor. You can take these pancakes, you could fill them with chocolate chips, you could throw some nuts in there, any fruit you want to put in there. These pancakes will keep really well in the fridge for a couple of days, and they also freeze amazingly. So you can make a huge batch and just have them ready in a moment's notice. It's just like, I don't even know. I don't even have the words to tell you how I feel. I'm just so happy right now. If you want to amp up your breakfast on a weekend, why not serve it with some Tempeh sausage? This takes a little extra step, but it is so delicious, and it goes perfectly with a tofu scramble or even some pancakes. It's fantastic. And it's really, really simple. So we're just gonna take a block of tempeh, and we're gonna crumble it up into the food processor. You don't have to be too pretty with this. The food processor is gonna do most of the work. And then we are just going to throw everything else into this. About 2 tablespoons of whole wheat flour. You can use any flour you want. If you're gluten-free, you can use a 1-to-1 blend, that's fine. Here we've got some seasonings. What I've got here is some rosemary, salt, pepper, and dried sage, some miso paste. You can find this in most grocery stores. It's often in the Asian section. About 2 tablespoons of vegetable broth, and then to give it that awesome sweet goodness, about 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. And now we're just gonna mix that all together. All right, that's pretty good. Doesn't look like much. We're gonna make it into patties now. We're gonna wet our hands first so things don't stick to it too much. And we're just gonna do our best to form it into, I don't know, 8 to 10 patties. About that, looks good. I preheated the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. We're gonna cook that for 30 minutes, flipping it halfway through. So there's the breakfast sausage. This stuff is great as a side with a tofu scramble or some pancakes or waffles. It's also just great if you put it on a bowl or inside of a breakfast sandwich, and it freezes really, really well. So you can make a double, triple batch of this and have it for a long time to come. And it has got an amazing crunch. The miso and the maple really gives it that sausage flavor that I remember. This is really delicious, and it reminds me of the stuff I had growing up. A little crumb. I got it, don't worry. All of today's recipes are available on pbwithj.ca. I've tried over the years to make a really good falafel, and it wasn't until someone told me to use dry chickpeas that it really came together. So they're not quite dry. What you're gonna wanna do is take a cup of chickpeas and soak them overnight, but don't cook them. You wanna keep them just hydrated, and that's about it. So we're gonna put those into our food processor, and then we're just gonna mix everything else in. Some lemon juice, chopped up onion. You could just do a clove of minced garlic. I have a little bit of roasted garlic, so I'm gonna use that because it's gonna add a little extra pop of flavor. Fresh parsley, about 2 tablespoons of tahini. And then we got our spice mix, which is turmeric, cumin, salt, and pepper. And then we're just gonna pulse this until it's nicely combined. Yeah, that's what you're looking for right there. I recommend getting some water just to wet your hands down. It's gonna keep everything from getting too sticky. I like to make probably about 10 to 12 balls here. Kind of the size of a golf ball, I guess. Tends to work. I mean, the texture is just gonna be kind of weird. You just wanna hold it together. It's gonna feel like it'll fall apart really quickly, and it does. So just hold it together enough to make a ball shape. Okay, so this made about a dozen or so. If I was at home, I would use my air fryer at around 375 degrees, but here at the farm, I have a convection oven, which does more or less the same thing. I'm gonna put this on and check it around 10 minutes, and that should be just enough to get these nice and crisp. These ended up cooking more like 15, 20 minutes inside the convection oven, but on my air fryer at home, it's usually around 12 minutes. Just keep on cooking until they get a nice little brown on them. You can put these in a salad, you can put them inside of a falafel, drizzle them with tahini. There's so many different ways to enjoy these. I love to put them with a little bit of mustard. They're crunchy on the outside, soft in the middle. These are so good. I love these things. These also freeze really, really well, so you can make a giant batch and use them over and over again. One of my go-to plant-based staples is making soup or stew from scratch, and it's not as hard as you would think. And what's really great about it is that you can use up vegetables in your fridge that are maybe getting close to their expiry date. And you could also just use up any beans, any flavorings. It really is a choose your own stew. I always start with a little bit of onion, so I've already been sauteing that inside the pan. Now we're gonna add our liquid. So I've just got some vegetable broth, a can of diced tomatoes. We're gonna put the whole thing in, liquid and all. Put a cup of tomato sauce, quarter cup of apple cider vinegar. That's gonna add a nice little salt to the dish. A little balsamic vinegar in there. And now I'm gonna put a little bit of maple syrup in here, and what that's gonna do is that's just gonna help the acidity from all the tomatoes in there and just kind of round out the flavors of the dish. And then we're gonna add some kind of a plant-based protein. Here I have a whole bunch of kidney beans and chickpeas. There's about 2 or 3 cups cooked in there. And then you wanna add about 6 cups of vegetables. Do a mixture of starchy, non-starchy. For my starch, I'm just using frozen butternut squash. I got some mushrooms, and then I just have a bunch of other things. I think there's some carrots, some zucchini, and some yellow peppers in there. So this thing is overflowing. We're gonna stir that all around. And we're also gonna add now some more seasonings. Here I have about 3 to 4 teaspoons of different seasonings. I've got garlic salt, rosemary, sage in there, and I'm gonna add salt and pepper to taste. So I'm doing this in an Instant Pot. I'm going to cook it for 15 minutes on manual. If you're doing this on the stove pot, bring it to a boil and leave it for about 40 to 45 minutes. Just keep on letting it cook until the vegetables have softened enough to your liking. So we cooked this for 15 minutes in the pressure cooker. And now we just want to add, oh, look at that steam. Now we're gonna add our kale. Again, you can use spinach if you want. We'll mix it around. And I just want to give it a few minutes for that just to soften inside of there, and then this delicious stew will be ready to consume. Oh, that smell is so inviting. And again, we just made this with what was left in the fridge. You could make a different soup every single week, just using whatever you've got. It is so comforting. Trying to get that perfect bite with a little bit of everything. It's like a warm hug inside of my body. It's rich and hearty and earthy from all those different vegetables and that butternut squash. And the beans just kind of melt in your mouth. If you don't like stew, we can't be friends. You guys want some soup? So we're gonna take that plant-based cheese that I made back in episode 1 for the nachos, and we are gonna make a super quick and delicious grilled cheese sandwich. So I'm just taking a little bit of dairy-free margarine and I'm spreading it on the back of some sourdough. I don't tend to use a lot of oil in my cooking, but this one I can taste, and what's grilled cheese without a little bit of butter on it? So now what we're gonna do is just slather on that cheese we made the other day for the nachos. You really can't get too much on here because it's just pure deliciousness. I'm using a sandwich press here, but if all you have is a frying pan, that's fine too. Just cook it on one side until it browns, flip it over, and cook it some more. It's pouring out the edges. Look at the way that cheese is just oozing over the side. I definitely put way too much in this, but I don't care. That beautiful golden crisp on top of the sourdough, oh my goodness. It makes me so happy. This brings me back to childhood, when I would just sit on the couch and watch cartoons and have tomato soup and eat grilled cheese and just be happy for forever. That's what this is. This is happiness in a sandwich. I'll get to you in a second. I'm eating grilled cheese.
Just jumping in there, we're about halfway through the recipes right now. Hopefully you're enjoying them so far. If you are, hit that like button and let me know in the comments below which of these recipes you're more likely to make for yourself. And also, subscribe, because you've gone this far. You probably want to see more content like this, right? Back to the video.
All of today's recipes are available on pbwithj.ca. One of the most consumed products that people don't even necessarily associate with being plant-based is non-dairy milk. So that's almond milk, oat milk, cashew milk, soy milk, and people spend hundreds of dollars a year buying it in the store. But I'm gonna show you how to make your own. Today, we're using oat milk, but the same process works no matter what you're using. So all you really need is a high-speed blender and a nut milk bag. So the first thing we're gonna do is put 4 cups of water into our blender, and then we're gonna add a cup of oats. Put the lid on, and then we're gonna crank it on high for 30 seconds to about a minute, just until everything's nicely combined. After that, we're gonna pour it into the nut milk bag and capture it inside a large container. It's a bit messy, so you're gonna want as big a container as possible. And this is where you see why it's still called milk, because you literally have to milk the bag just to squeeze all that wonderful goodness out. So the cleanup for this is, a bit of a thing with a nut milk bag, but I know some people will also use the refuge inside of here to make cookies and other things. Why buy it at the store when you can milk it at home? So this amount fits into a large mason jar. And there you have it. Now you've got oat milk. So this stores at least 4 to 5 days inside the fridge. You're gonna notice that it'll separate. All you have to do is give it a good shake and then it's ready to use. Non-dairy plant-based milk. If you have a little extra time and the right tools, there's no reason why you need to buy it at the store. In my other life as a filmmaker, I'm often going from meeting to meeting, or I'm on set, or I'm in prep, and sometimes I'm never quite sure when my next meal is gonna be. So I always have some of these breakfast cookies in my bag for a really quick snack that'll also fill me up and just tastes amazing. So we're gonna take a really, really ripe banana and we're gonna plop that in and we're gonna give it a little mushy mash. So to that, we're gonna add maple syrup. It's about a quarter cup, a half a cup of natural peanut butter. You could also use almond butter here if you prefer. If you're making a nut-free version, a sun butter would work as well. You could also get away with tahini. We're just gonna mix that up. It's okay if you get a couple little banana lumps in there, but try your best to smooth it all out. Next, what we've got here is almond flour. You could grind up sunflower seeds and use these instead if you have a nut allergy. We're gonna plop those in, a teaspoon of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, quarter cup of flaxseed, a cup and about a quarter of rolled oats, a cup of grated zucchini. You could also use carrot if you don't have any zucchini or you just want to try something different. All right, once you start to see everything nicely mixed, we're gonna add our last couple of mix-ins. I like to have some kind of a nut or a seed. So today I'm using pecans. I like a dried fruit. I got cranberries here. You could use raisins, currants, goji berries. And then this is optional. If you want it to be healthier, leave these out, but I'm putting in some chocolate chips. And then we're just gonna stir it up. Nothing is worse than getting a cookie with no chocolate chips on it. So now we're gonna put these onto our pans. I tend to use a 1/3 of a cup measure. I tend to put 4 or 5 cookies on each sheet. This tends to make between 9 and 10. I just wet my hands and I just kind of press them down into some kind of a disc shape. They won't really spread out that much on the pan, but they make a big cookie. So you just want to give them some room to move around, you know? We're gonna put this into an oven at 350 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes, depending on your oven. And then we're gonna rotate the pans halfway through the bake just to make sure that there's an even crispness on all the cookies. There are the breakfast cookies. These are just a great snack to have on you at any time where you just need a quick pick-me-up, or if you're gonna skip a meal, 1 or 2 of these will do wonders for you. These store really, really well in the freezer. Otherwise, they'll keep on the counter for 4 to 5 days. Oh my God, yeah! I love me a muffin. The problem with most muffins that you buy outside of your home is that they're more of a dessert than they are a snack because they're loaded with oil and processed sugar. We avoid that by using applesauce instead of oil and then bananas instead of sugar. These are also naturally gluten-free because I'm using oat flour. If you don't have any oat flour on hand, but you have a blender and oats, you can make your own in about 30 seconds in a high-speed blender. If you don't want to make these gluten-free, you can easily just swap this out with flour. We're gonna mix all of our dry ingredients. So we've got 2 cups of oat flour in here. Then we've got flaxseed, baking soda, baking powder, and cinnamon. So now we've got our dry ingredients. We're gonna mix them together until they're well combined. Now we got 4 very ripe bananas in here. We're gonna mix them up in the food processor until they're just nice and mashy. Great. Now we're gonna add in about a half a cup of fruit juice. Whatever you got on hand works. This is an apple pomegranate mix, some applesauce. I'm not just putting the applesauce in because it's an apple muffin. I'm putting it in place of oil. A half a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar and a capful of vanilla. We're gonna puree that until it's all mixed together. We're gonna pour our wet mixture into our dry mixture and mix it up just enough so that it's combined. Now we're gonna add our mix-ins. 2 cups of apples. You can use any kind of fruit you want. And a half a cup of raisins. You could add nuts, dried fruit, chocolate chips, anything you want in there. And now we'll just stir it together until everything is evenly incorporated. Now we're just gonna scoop it into our muffin molds. I like to use an ice cream scoop. Just keep on filling them until you've got about the same amount in every single pan. I'm gonna bake these at 375 for 20 to 25 minutes. If you're baking yours in a silicone muffin pan too, the trick is to let them rest for 10 to 15 minutes and then pop them out gently and let them rest upside down. They'll firm up much better that way. They're soft and moist. It tastes like autumn in a little comforting package. You can customize these muffins to whatever flavors you want. Use seasonal fruit, frozen fruit's fine too. Nuts, dried fruit, chocolate, whatever you want. Muffins. All of today's recipes are available on pbwithj.ca. We're gonna make something that your kids are gonna absolutely love. Tofu Nuggets. Here's the trick to working with the tofu. You're gonna wanna buy extra firm, cut it open, take it out of its package, and drain off any excess liquid. Wrap it in either some paper towels or a dish towel, and then press it between 2 plates and put something heavy on top. I usually just use a bunch of cookbooks. Leave that for about a half an hour, and that's gonna help draw out the extra liquid from inside. Next, we're gonna create our little station here. We've got a cup of flour. We're gonna put a cup of plant milk with a tablespoon and a half of apple cider vinegar. You could also use lemon here. What that's gonna do is turn it into kind of a buttermilk consistency. And last but not least, we have our final breading. I've taken bran flakes and I've grinded them up. I've also got a mix of spices in here. I've got nutritional yeast, oregano, paprika, garlic salt, and a little bit of salt. You're gonna take one of your nuggets, put it into the flour, get it nice and coated, dunk it into the milk, into the topping. We're gonna pop these into the oven at 450 degrees for 25 minutes, and we're gonna flip these halfway through. And here are the tofu nuggets. Feel free to use whatever topping you want on these things. I like mustard, ketchup works just fine, whatever you want. Even on their own, they're pretty good. They even got a little bit of a crunch. And then it's just surrounded by this crust of deliciousness. These are the kind of things that go very fast in my house. Who doesn't love a nugget? So what are we gonna tease today in the kitchen? What's Anya gonna make for us?
I don't know. I think maybe you should ask her about the Jack Burger. I highly recommend it.
Okay, so what's our first step?
So we'll start with the barbecue sauce. We'll toss the onions in here. I think we're ready to go. We'll toss in our garlic here too and let those two simmer together. Okay, so once your onions are translucent and your garlic is very aromatic, then we're gonna be adding a couple things to our pot. So we're gonna add in our salt and pepper here, chipotles.
That's a big spatula for a little ramekin.
Baby jar. Onion powder and garlic powder. Get our Dijon in there, a little bit of soy sauce. And now we'll go in with the brown sugar and mix that all together. And the brown sugar will melt and kind of let out its sweetness. Apple cider vinegar, the bourbon, and then we'll add in our ketchup and tomato paste here.
You're using a smaller spatula for the pitcher.
I didn't.
And you're using a smaller ramekin.
I didn't plan my spatulas very well today. We're gonna blitz it up, and then, like I said, the longer you can leave that on the stove, the better. And I'm gonna show you how to process the jackfruit here. This is the part that pulls real nice, the firmer part in the center.
But do you blitz that up too?
Yes, we do.
Look at
You
that.
just tear it apart. We're gonna bring this over here and just quickly pulse it up in a food processor. All right, so you'll see it kind of resembles a ground chuck consistency almost. And we've got our barbecue sauce all done and ready. We're gonna add in a good amount here. You wanna mix that all together?
Oh, look at me.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna just spread it out here on our baking sheet with parchment paper. So we have our oven preheated to 425. We're gonna just slide it on in there and time it for about 25 minutes.
And then flippy flip?
Yeah, and then another 25. That's what it's gonna look like. It's looking pretty porky,
I
I'd
like
say.
it.
So that's gonna be the bulk of our sandwich. Okay, so to top the sandwich, I like a nice creamy coleslaw. So in here we have some carrot, red onion, purple cabbage, and green cabbage, and a royal gala apple.
And the scariest mandolin.
Yeah.
Well, it brings a little bit of acidity to it, right?
Yeah, and it goes well with the barbecue idea, I think, you know? Traditionally, a creamy coleslaw would have mayo, right? So here we use some liquid gold called Aquafaba,
Right.
which is the juice from a can of chickpeas.
Plop it all in.
Yep, a little bit of white sugar and black pepper.
Oh.
And then we got a little bit of apple cider vinegar here.
And this
Nice
goes
and
on top
bright.
of the sandwich.
Yeah, so we're gonna get a little bit more jackfruit in a smaller pot here. I usually go about a half cup, and then we're gonna add like another tablespoon or so of sauce. Just pull it on out here. Look at that, perfectly golden.
Look at that.
Beautiful. We got our nice hot jackfruit here. Fresh, creamy coleslaw. There you have it.
Should we cheers it?
Yeah.
Is there a right way to eat this thing?
Whatever way's messiest.
I went with the biggest bite. There's so much going on there. There's texture. There's like this sweet, savory.
It's just so delicious. It's tangy and texture of it is surprising. Like you really wouldn't believe that you're eating something that's not meat.
Summertime barbecue comfort food.
It's pretty to look at too. It's like a rainbow. Well, thank you so much for making this sandwich with us.
My pleasure.
Now it's time to go back to my kitchen to make some more delicious dinners.
Now, if you go on the internet, you're gonna find a million different recipes for a plant-based burger. And the question is, which one do I want? It's hard to tell because what you want is the one that's catered to the tastes that you prefer, which is why I have a build your own burger recipe for you. So I have already pre-cooked some onions, garlic, and about 2 cups of vegetables. Next, you need a bean. I'm gonna go with a black bean right now. One more thing I'm gonna add with my vegetables is some spinach. And then you want a liquid of some kind. 3 tablespoons is the right amount. I have about 2 tablespoons of tomato sauce and 1 tablespoon of hot sauce. And then you're gonna want some kind of a spice mixture. I'm gonna use 4 teaspoons of spice here. Mine is a combination of oregano, chili powder, onion powder, cumin, and just a little bit of cayenne pepper. And then we're gonna mix this all up. You might need to stop it and scrape down a few times to keep it from sticking to the sides. This is really goopy, so now what you need to add is a binder of some kind. You could use flour, you could use cornmeal, you could use rice. This is about a cup of oats, and then we're gonna mix that all around as well. When it's about halfway mixed in, then we're gonna add our last ingredient, which I call a little textured ingredient. I'm using green olives. You could use dried herbs here, you could use sun-dried tomatoes, you could use nuts. Anything to give it a little bit of extra flavor and some kind of a texture. So then we're just gonna keep on pureeing this until it's all mixed together. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna measure this out onto silicone sheets. I used 1/3 of a cup measure, and that seems to be the right amount. We're gonna bake these for 20 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and then we are gonna flip them and cook them for another 15 minutes. So top it however you want based on the ingredients you've already put into it. I just put on some classic burger condiments here, but you can do it however you want. It's got such a really great flavor profile. It's got a nice little crunch to it. It tastes fresh and it's got a little bit of a kick. I love this. Have some fun with this. Try different combinations. Go crazy. You can literally be eating a different burger every single time. Yeah. When you have a little extra time to make something special, this is one of my all-time favorites from childhood, shepherd's pie. But I've given it the whole food plant-based twist. So the first thing we're gonna do is take about a cup of walnuts and we are going to pulse them inside of our food processor. Then I'm gonna mix in the cauliflower and pulse that again until it's mixed. And last goes in the mushrooms, and we're gonna pulse that around until it's also mixed in. You might need to stop this every now and then to wipe down the sides. So this is pretty good. Now we're gonna put some onions onto a pan and just let them cook around until they're nice and translucent. Now we're gonna take our little cauliflower walnut mixture and we're gonna dump that into the pan. It's already got this really nice consistency that's starting to look like ground beef. So I've got a little sauce here that's a combination of about 3 tablespoons of tamari sauce as well as a teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce. We're gonna drizzle that all over into here. All right, so now I'm gonna add my spices, onion powder, garlic powder, and basil. And then we are just gonna mix that around and cook that down for about 15 to 20 minutes. So while that finishes cooking, we're gonna come over here and make our mashed potatoes. So I steamed these for about 10 minutes. It's 2.5 pounds of potatoes. So I've been soaking a cup of cashews for about an hour in water, and I've got 3/4 a cup of water here. I'm gonna put in the cashews into the blender. I roasted some garlic, and then we are going to blend. All right, so we're gonna let that sit now, and we're just gonna lightly mash our potatoes. I left the skins on because I don't mind a rustic mashed potato. It takes forever to peel potatoes, and I just don't want to do it. You can add the cream sauce or stir it around until everything is just nice and combined. I've got my oven preheating at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. We are going to take our walnuts, cauliflower, mushroom mixture. We're gonna sprinkle that all over the bottom until it's got a nice even layer. Next, we're gonna add in a cup of corn and a cup of peas, frozen, fresh, whatever you got. So now we're gonna pour this potato mixture just all over the top, and that is ready to go into the oven. So again, we're baking it at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 25 minutes. So here is the shepherd's pie. This reminds me so much of childhood. Oh, the smell, it's so good. I can't wait to try it. That is comfort food goodness. It's got this really meaty, fatty texture because of the walnuts. It's so good. You can put some ketchup on this or hot sauce or barbecue sauce, but I love it just on its own. All of today's recipes are available on pbwithj.ca. For dessert to really tick off all the boxes, it has to be decadent, and this is one of my wife's favorites. So we're gonna start off making a nut crust. Today I'm using peanuts, but you could use pecans or walnuts or anything you wanna use. With around 1/4 cup of sugar. I like to use coconut sugar. And then we are just gonna pulse that until it's nicely combined and crumbly. You have to be careful with peanuts because they can turn into peanut butter really, really quickly, and we don't want that. So now we're going to add about 1.5 tablespoons of coconut oil, and then just a pinch of salt. And you can avoid this if you want to, but I like to put in just a little bit of chili powder, about 1/4 teaspoon. And then we are just gonna pulse that again until it's combined. So we're gonna scoop this into a tart pan. If you have one with a removable bottom, that's kind of ideal. So we just wanna press that down in so it just kind of forms the basis of a crust here. So this is looking pretty good. All the nooks and crannies seem to be filled in. Next, we're gonna make our chocolate mixture. We're gonna take about 520 grams of silken tofu or soft tofu. We're gonna put that into our food processor. We're gonna add just like a pinch of salt and a teaspoon or a capful of vanilla. Whir that up. So we're gonna wanna mix this just until it's nice and smooth and combined. All right, that's looking good. Next, we are gonna add in about 2 cups of melted chocolate chips. All I did was just put 2 cups of chocolate chips into this bowl, put it in the microwave in 30-second increments, and just kept on stirring it until it was nice and smooth. So after we pour in that chocolate, we're just gonna mix it all together. Scrape down the sides if you need to as you're going along. That's looking pretty awesome. Okay, next, we're gonna pour this into our pie shell. We are gonna put this into the fridge or freezer for at least 20 minutes to an hour. So this has been in the freezer for about an hour or 2, and now is the moment of truth. I don't know if this is gonna pop out nicely. I've got a false bottom pie tart. Let's see. It worked! It worked! All right, so now we're gonna slice this up and see what it tastes like. So there's the chocolate tart. Put a little raspberry on it because it's pretty. And also, I like raspberries. It's so creamy and delicious. The peanut gives it a really nice flavor as well. And it's got that little chili powder, just to let you know it's there. This is the reason my wife still loves me after all those years. Now I'm gonna walk you through a crowd-pleasing dessert that you can make in literally 5 minutes. I call it apple pie in a pan a la mode. If you've got a frying pan and a high-speed blender and all of this stuff, you can make it. Pay attention, this is gonna happen fast. You're gonna thinly slice 3 medium apples. Then you're gonna heat up your frying pan and put on about 1/4 cup of water. Add 1/4 cup of currants or raisins, spread out your apple slices, and sprinkle the cinnamon on top. Then you're gonna put a lid on top because you wanna steam those apples. While that's happening, you're gonna race over to your high-speed blender. You're gonna put in 10 to 12 kernels of macadamia nuts, 2 large frozen bananas, and a teaspoon of vanilla. Crank the blender on the high speed and mash it down until everything starts to churn around really nicely and create a really smooth and creamy mixture. By the time the banana cream mixture is ready to go, the apples will be done. Scoop those into 3 or 4 serving bowls and then top it with a dollop of that banana cream. And there it is, apple pie in a pan a la mode. Sometimes we have fun in my house and we just set a stopwatch to see how fast we can make this thing. I will often add nuts as well to the frying pan. About a 1/4 cup is nice. Just crumple it up and throw it in when you throw in the currants. Let's get a nice little bite of everything. It is such a simple, amazing, fast dessert. The apples have softened up really, really nicely. The cinnamon adds this really, really flavorful bite, and the little creamy bananas, it just brings it all together and it cools it down and kind of melts. It almost makes a bit of a sauce, which is not a bad thing. I love it. I love it so much. This is one of my favorite rustic desserts. Depending where you're from in North America, they either call it a slump or a grunt. Either way, it's a Depression era dessert. It was made for one of those things that you can just use whatever you got on hand and make something delicious. So I'm making a double batch, but normally what you would do is you would take 4 cups of whatever fruit you have. You can use fresh or frozen, use something seasonal. So here we have a mix of berries and peaches in here. We are gonna add a 1/2 cup of water, fruit juice of your choice, whatever you've got. Something with a little bit of citric isn't a bad idea. I believe this is like an apple pomegranate blend, an 1/8 cup of maple syrup. We are just gonna stir that all around, just to give it a good, nice mixture. And then we are going to plop that onto the stove. So now we're gonna make our cake mixture. We're gonna mix all of our dry ingredients together first. We have a cup of flour. I'm using whole wheat. You could use white flour here. You could use gluten-free 1-to-1 if you have gluten issues. We're gonna add a teaspoon of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, teaspoon of cinnamon, a dash of salt, 1/4 cup of granulated sugar. I'm using coconut sugar. So just give that a mix together so everything is nice and combined. And then we are going to add our wet ingredients together. So we have, for a regular amount would be a 1/2 cup of plant milk. I'm using oat, a 1.5 tablespoons of applesauce. So we're using applesauce here as part of our binder to help everything kind of stick together instead of using an egg. About a teaspoon of vanilla, and then we're just gonna mix that together really, really quickly. And then we will pour it into our dry mixture. And then we're just gonna mix that all together until we don't see any of that dry mixture. We don't wanna overmix this because we don't wanna work that batter. We want it to keep it light and floofy. And if you overmix batter, it'll start to get dense, and we don't want that at all. And the last little touch I like to put in is a magical baking tip, zest. If you have oranges, limes, lemons, any kind of citrus, just grate the zest off and add a teaspoon to 2 teaspoons into the batter. It will infuse so much brightness to the flavor. Just adds this nice, wonderful pop. Just mix it all around so it's incorporated throughout everything. Your mouth will thank me. Now all we're gonna do is plop this onto our boiling fruit. We're gonna put the lid on, and it's gonna steam the batter and cook it at the same time and infuse all of those flavors from the fruit into the batter. We're gonna steam that for about 25 minutes, and then we're gonna turn the heat off and let it sit for at least 10 to 15 minutes, but you can let it sit as long as you want and cool down. So this has now been sitting for about 15-20 minutes, and as you can see, the whole thing is just poofed up. It almost looks like a little brain. I mean, it's not the prettiest dessert, but it is gonna taste amazing. Even the color is fascinating because it's not that kind of brownish, light brown color that was in there before. You can see how it's taken on the colors of the fruit that have been steaming inside of it. And the best way to scoop this is just a big scoop, get down in there so that you get some of the fruit, some of the cake bit, and then just pop it into a bowl. You can serve this with some plant-based ice cream or just have it on its own. Ready? It's so soft and delicate, it just kind of falls apart in your mouth. That orange really, really pops. There's a lot of subtle little flavors going on in here that all meld together into just a really delicious experience. Again, use whatever fruit you have on hand. Mix it up every time. Change up the spices if you want. I love it so much. Here's a frozen treat that takes a while to set, but it comes together really quickly. Frozen fudge pops. So what we're gonna do is take a can of full-fat coconut milk, a half a cup cocoa powder, quarter cup of maple syrup, a pinch of salt, and a cap full of vanilla, roughly 1 teaspoon. And then we are gonna blend that all together. So now, we're gonna pour this into the molds. Leave a little bit of room at the top because they will expand a bit in the freezer. These filled about 4 to 6 molds depending on the size of your molds. And if you have more liquid than you have molds, just put them into ice cube trays. We're gonna freeze these for at least 4 hours up to overnight, and then we're gonna pop them out. The frozen fudge bar is ready. Oh, it smells like my childhood. Oh my goodness, it's so creamy. Oh, that is so good. It's creamy, it's firm, but it melts in my mouth. It's got this flavor that's somewhere between like a chocolate milkshake and cold hot chocolate, if that makes any sense. This is so delicious. You can have a lot of fun with different molds and shapes. Put it into little ice cube trays or those silicone chocolate molds. 5-year-old Jeremy is very happy. So now I'm gonna show you how we're gonna create this really epic, delicious dessert that looks complicated, but it's super simple. It's a trifle. The first thing we're gonna do is make a cake. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna whisk together all of our dry ingredients. So we put in 1 cup of flour. I'm using whole wheat. So now we're gonna add in some baking powder, baking soda, and salt, as well as just short of a half a cup of coconut sugar and just shy of half a cup of cocoa powder. So that is nicely combined. Now we're gonna add in all of our wet ingredients together. I added a half a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar to some plant milk. I'm using oat here, and that makes it curdle, so it creates a bit of a buttermilk. Some applesauce. This is in place of the oil, a teaspoon and a half of vanilla. And then we are gonna stir that all together. Now we're gonna mix in our wet ingredients to our dry ingredients. So now we're gonna add the magic ingredient that keeps this cake really moist. Boiling water. You don't wanna add this until everything else is combined, and you wanna add it in slowly. Stir a little bit, keep on going. This is what's gonna keep it really moist and delicious as it's baking in the pan. So use a circular 9-inch cake pan. I've got a silicone one here. If you've got a metal one, make sure you grease it somehow before you go. We're gonna smack it. That gets the air bubbles out of it. And now we're gonna bake it in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 to 35 minutes. When it's done, take a toothpick, stick it in, and see if it comes out clean. If it does, let it rest for about 10 minutes inside the pan, and then transfer it to a cooling rack until it's completely cooled. Our cake is cooling, and we're almost ready to assemble the trifle. But first, I wanna make the top layer, which is whipped cream. Now you're asking, how do I make whipped cream plant-based? The magic ingredient? Aquafaba. What's aquafaba? Chickpea juice. If you make your own chickpeas using dried beans, you can just cook it down and then get it to about this opacity. You want it to be cold before we start making the whipped cream. What we're gonna do is pour this into the mixer and crank it on high and add the half a teaspoon of cream of tartar. Let that go until it's semi-opaque. We're gonna bring down the speed and mix in a tablespoon of maple syrup at a time and bring it back up for about a minute. Go back and forth doing that until it's the right level of sweetness for you. If you don't wanna use maple syrup, you could also use icing sugar for this. Keep doing this until stiff peaks have formed inside of the whipped cream. And then you're gonna wanna add in a teaspoon of vanilla and a splash of lemon and any other flavor mix-ins or extracts you wanna use. Mix it for about another 3 minutes. The beauty of this stuff is you can't over-mix it like you do with egg whites. Look at how the peak doesn't move. That is when you know it is ready. Now we're gonna assemble our trifle. So trifles are based on 5 different layers: base, cream, fruit, sauce, garnish. So what we're gonna use for the base is this chocolate cake we made earlier. I've cut it into triangles to make it pretty. On top of that, we're gonna lay that ginger cream we made earlier in the episode. Then we're gonna put on some mango that I roasted. On top of that, we are gonna add the Aquafaba Whipped Cream we just made. And then we're gonna top it with some toasted coconut. It's gorgeous. It's all about that layering. You can see all the different layers from the outside of the dish. You got your base, you got your cream, your fruit, your sauce on top, and your wonderful, wonderful coconut garnish. This thing is way too pretty for me to have by myself. This is the kind of dish you want to share. Grab a spoon.
Pretty good.
There you go. It's so good. It was pretty, now it's a mess, but that's okay. Fruit just has to taste good. If it looks good, that's a bonus.
Thank you for sticking around this far. If you got to the end of this video, you are a super duper trooper. It also means you liked it, so let us know below. Like it, comment, let us know which of these recipes you're gonna make, and then subscribe so you get more content like this. Speaking of which, YouTube thinks you like this, so let the algorithm be happy and hit it. Thanks.